I think that capitalism is not just an economic system or an economic theory, it's how our politics and culture operates. It's an entire system, it's a way of life. And I think capitalism is being challenged by three things: demographics, climate change, and technology. And I'll make an argument for that. But first on demographics. There's a play out now, it's showing in Boston, and I think they want to come to New York, and it's called The Black Clown. It's actually a musical, and it's based on Langston Hughes's poem, The Black Clown, 1931. And some of you may remember that when sanitation workers went on strike in Memphis, Tennessee in 1968, many of the sanitation workers, black sanitation workers, held up signs saying, "I am a man." And I don't know how many of you know that that actually came out of Langston Hughes's very popular poem. And the poem begins, "You laugh because I'm poor and black and funny, not the same as you. Because my mind is dull and dice instead of books will do for me to play with when the day is through. I am the fool of the whole world. Laugh and push me down. Only in song and laughter I rise again, a black clown." Poem goes on, but at the end, it talks about all of black history, but at the end it says, "Cry to the world that all might understand. I was once a black clown, but now I'm a man." That's where the poem comes from. And the poem was addressed actually to the white labor movement and to the white left in the early 1930s. And Langston Hughes, working in Harlem, there was another person, W.B. Du Bois, working in Harlem, and he published a book the next year called Black Reconstruction, also addressed to white labor and to the white left. And Black Reconstruction made the argument that white workers have identified themselves as a superior group, unlike black workers, separate, and that is how capitalism operates. And that labor was about to make the same mistake again if they didn't integrate the labor movement, and if they caved in to the Southern Dixiecrats' demands that agricultural labor and domestic labor be excluded from the Labor Relations Act. And labor caved in. They did what Du Bois begged them not to do. I think this is fundamental to understanding how capitalism works, and as Fran said, from the very beginning. The US is only a couple of decades away from becoming a majority non-white nation. This is a challenge to capitalism because from its very beginning, a system of inequality had to have a way of winning the majority of working people to its side. The system we created, the kind of democracy we created, depended on racial hierarchy. It wasn't just how the Supreme Court is structured. It was slavery. Slavery. It was racial segregation. It was colonialism. So that most workers, and here we're talking about white workers, would not see themselves as fundamentally aligned with workers of color. And that is what Langston Hughes was talking about when he says, "You see me as a clown. You don't see me as you." Now, this is not an original argument. Du Bois made this argument. Randolph made this argument. Thurgood Marshall made this argument in Brown versus Board of Ed. He said racial segregation was created to keep poor whites and blacks from coming together during the progressive movement. That's what the whole purpose of it is. It's not about education, it's about that. Thurgood Marshall said that, Martin Luther King said that. One of the things we have not done in American history very much is read black people. And that's another one of the great things about a lot of current scholarship. There's a lot coming out now of what black political thought and critique has been for the last 250 years. Now, if white workers ever identified with the black poor, the whole system would collapse. But until now, they never have. not as majority. This is what has kept the system stable. The problem is that workers who think of themselves as above black people or above Latino people are becoming a minority. Workers of color are becoming more numerous, and young white people, especially in cities, are more and more breaking loose from white nationalism or white superiority. This is the undercurrent of what we were seeing with Andrew Gillum in Florida, Stacey Abrams in Georgia, Ben Jealous in Maryland, Ayanna Pressley in Massachusetts. It's the force that elected Obama twice. And within this, there's a vibrant black feminist upsurge that eventually might link arms with the white feminist upsurge, and that would be devastating to capitalism as we know it. It would be devastating because workers would start voting for candidates, policies, and laws that overturn inequality. So that's the first threat. Second threat, climate change. It's not only that the overuse of fossil fuels has disrupted the weather and threatens to destroy much of human civilization. What's worse is that we saw this coming, and we didn't stop it, and we still haven't stopped it. This points to how stupid and irrational it is to have private interests, in this case energy companies, be the main planners for how society makes energy. If government hands over responsibility for sustainable energy to private groups, and we stay in our current path, there's going to be a big backlash. Last year it was Puerto Rico, the year before it was Houston, today, right now, it's North Carolina. These things are not going away, they're going to become more and more frequent. But we are not only being stupid and irrational about energy, the world is literally running out of fresh water. We're running out of concrete, we're running out of steel. China and India alone build a city the size of Houston every month. And we need 1.5 times the amount of concrete and steel that we have in the world to continue this. We have stuck to this myth that we don't need government and the market will solve every kind of problem. We're not investing nearly enough in green chemistry and materials science to come up with sustainable alternatives to basic materials we need for human survival. We actually do need a government that's capable of planning for the common good. For example, the biggest threat to Manhattan with climate change is heat. It's extreme heat. We ought to be debating whether we should make Manhattan look like Venice to keep us cool. That might not only be a great job opportunity, it could make Manhattan a lot more beautiful. But this is the kind of thing government ought to be putting before the people, and we're not. We need a government to be on the cutting edge, putting issues before the public, not simply having politicians taking donations from big companies. Third challenge, technology. Technology has solved our most basic productivity problems. Fossil fuels technology, extracting fossil fuels, actually generates 10 trillion human work hours a day, if you were to equate it with human labor. It just far surpasses what human labor contributes in terms of productivity. Kansas alone last year produced enough wheat for 138 billion loaves of bread. Science and technology have really solved the basic problems of survival. And most workers today don't manufacture anything. They don't grow food either. Most workers in services and distribution, most wages in America have nothing to do with supply and demand curves. They are set by politics. What teachers make, what hospital workers make, what government workers make, even what farmers make, is all set by government policy, and that's determined through politics. It has nothing to do with the cost of widgets. Finance is over 40% of the economy today. In the 1970s, it was 7%. And they don't operate by the so-called laws of the market either. In 2008, we bailed out the finance sector with almost $10 trillion of taxpayer money. That surpasses no socialist country, no communist country has ever bailed out failing firms close to what we did in 2008 alone. So this whole thing about debate between socialism versus capitalism, it's actually a silly debate. We are beyond that. What we have right now is not about that. It's about power and control, not these old traditional debates about what is a more productive way of doing this or that. The real issues we need to confront have to do with distribution, and distribution is connected to ownership. Are you kidding? Okay. Right now, robots are beginning to be used in Walmart to stock shelves. This will lead to layoffs. If big box retail stores are owned by investors like Target, they will have no choice but to introduce robots and lay off workers too, otherwise they can't stay in business. Robots and artificial intelligence threaten to increase unemployment dramatically in the near future. Instead of making people's lives better, technology could make things worse. If Walmart was an employee-owned company, on the other hand, the workers could decide to introduce robots and cut their hours down to 30 hours a week, or allow themselves paid vacations, or raise their wages. This is how ownership connects to distribution, and this is why ownership matters. If we want to ensure a prosperous future for workers, we have to address these issues right now. Finally, Trump represents a feverish reaction to the things I just outlined. If the people are to use democracy to challenge inequality, or if they're about to, then some forces in America think the solution is to undermine democracy itself. If diversity and inclusion threatens racial hierarchy, then some forces in America think the solution is to build and weaponize a radical white nationalist movement. If the people are becoming wise to climate change, some people in America think the answer is to deny science or even the possibility of scientific truth. This is a serious moment, perhaps the most serious moment we've had in the world since World War II or the Civil War. I think the nation needs a strong labor movement, but if labor is to become strong, it has to reinvent itself fundamentally by addressing each of the three issues I outlined. The building trades have to reach out to the unemployed Black and Latino youth and then go over to the environmental groups and say, let's build a movement for full employment and let's make America green and sustainable, and that will be our pathway. The hospital workers have to organize the millions of unorganized Medicaid recipients in New York City and beyond and say, let's make our communities healthier and wealthier at the same time by building a health system of wellness that keeps people out of emergency rooms. Steel workers and auto workers need to address who will own the new high-tech urban manufacturing space and not just say, we let company elites bake the pie and we just fight for a slice of whatever they decide to cook. That is a path to extinction for labor. If labor does this, we can defend and strengthen our democracy, and our democracy can shape the kind of economic future we want. Thank you.